Hi, everybody. Welcome. So glad that you could join us for today's TouchPoint to the Point webinar. Today, we are covering Scheduler. So this is a relatively new feature. Actually, it's a very new feature that some of you have helped us. I see some familiar names coming in right now. Some of you have helped us beta test this. Others of you, might be the first time that you're seeing this. So we're going to talk through it. So advanced screen there. So the hosts today are myself. My name is Andrew Triplett. I am the head of consulting here at TouchPoint. For those of you that don't know me, it's my job to kind of come alongside our church partners and help them to utilize different features of the system, get up and running for a lot of our new church partners. And for those that have been with us for some time, we might go and kind of do some tune-up, or maybe we'll discuss best practice around registration, things of that nature. Joining me today on the webinar is Marcia Sims, who is the hospitality manager at Peachtree Presbyterian Church in downtown Atlanta. Marcia?
Yes, hello, good afternoon. Thank you, Andrew. As you mentioned, I am the hospitality manager at Peachtree Presbyterian Church. We are located, as you said, in Atlanta, Georgia. And to give you an idea of the size of our church, we have more than 7,000 members.
Perfect. All right. So the agenda for today is really pretty simple. I'm going to spend about 15 minutes walking through the features. I'm going to spend the next about 15 minutes just showing you the nuts and bolts of what this is, what Scheduler is, so you can get a sense of what we're talking about. And then the second half of today's presentation, I'm going to be asking Marcia a few questions. Marcia, as I just noted, is on staff at a church. They are utilizing this feature, and they've done a great job rolling it out to their teams, to their volunteer teams. We know that it can be a little bit daunting rolling out features to volunteers, especially one that we're actually really asking them to participate in. And so Marcia has done that to great effect at Peachtree Presbyterian. So we're going to discuss that. So now what I'm going to do is try to, as smoothly as possible, take that down and get into the database. All right. So here is the database. Like I said, we're just going to kind of start from scratch, and then I have one that's a little bit further along and already set up. So I'm going to go to involvements and then add new involvement. Now, for those of you that have been using TouchPoint for some time, you know that just about everything in TouchPoint starts with an involvement. And Scheduler is no different. In fact, Scheduler is, I like to tell people that it's just a fancy registration form. It's a registration form with a lot of bells and whistles, but a registration form nonetheless. So for our name today, we're just going to call this the webinar scheduler. Okay, and I need some ushers and greeters for our webinar. So it's kind of a silly example, but it's true to life for a lot of you. You need to schedule ushers and greeters. So from here, my registration type is, of course, scheduler. Submit that, allow the system to create the involvement itself. Now, the first thing that you're going to see when you create the scheduler from scratch, when we're starting this brand new here, is that you can see that the system gives you 3 checkboxes. So there's 3 things that you need to do to set up the scheduler. The first is to specify our date range for how long is this taking place. Second is to set up some teams and time slots. And then third is to configure our messages, confirmation emails, reminder emails, things of that nature. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm going to go here to the settings tab, and now we have a choice to make. So there's 2 ways that you can set up your schedule. You can do a calendar start and end. And that makes sense a lot of times if you are doing an event that, say, is happening for a finite amount of time. It has a definite start and a definite end time for which we need volunteers. A lot of you have VBS coming up, and you need to schedule out some volunteers for VBS. That's a perfect example of when we would use the calendar start and end, as opposed to rolling number of weeks. Rolling number of weeks is a little bit different, because what that's doing is, with every passing week, we're going to add 1 week. So, for example, I'm going to indicate that this is a rolling number of weeks, because we need ushers for our church, for our Sunday morning worship service. And so this is something that's going to go on from now until the foreseeable future. So I'm going to set that at 12. A recommendation I'm going to make right here is to not set that number too high. I think there's kind of this natural tendency to do 52 weeks because that's a year, nice clean number. Most people don't know what they're doing a year from now, and so it's just a lot of information on the screen. So instead, I recommend something a little bit smaller, like 12. Another setting that I'm going to mention right now, this is not part of the initial setup process, but it's a very important concept for the scheduler itself, and that is this checkbox right here, non-involvement members. So what does that mean? So if I have this checked for non-involvement members, that means that I'm going to allow non-involvement members, in other words, people not in this involvement, to volunteer for the volunteer positions. That means I can put this on my website, and anyone across the entire world can come to the website, click the link, and volunteer for one of these time slots. That makes a lot of sense in things like work days, maybe volunteer days, where the church is going into the community, doing some volunteer work, things like that. But it doesn't make a lot of sense in the case of like ushers and greeters. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off, save this. Great. And now we're going to go over here to registration, the registration tab, and now we're going to build out those teams and time slots. Okay. So this will all come together when we look at the form here in just a second, but for now we're just kind of getting things set up. So what is this? So for we need some ushers, like I said, we need some ushers for this Sunday, or for every Sunday. And our worship service is at 9:15 a.m. Okay. My team is going to be called ushers. Now lockout days. All right. So lockout day, this is an important concept. Basically what lockout day means is that is the last day before which someone can cancel their commitment. Once they're within that threshold of 14 days, now we've said you can no longer cancel your commitment. Instead, we're going to ask the volunteer to request a sub. So they're going to go out and get their own substitute for the time slot. Okay. And so for our ushers, we need 6 ushers for this Sunday. Okay. Like I said, we also need some greeters. So I'm going to go ahead and build a team for greeters. Lockout days will remain the same. But for this one, I want people to be able to select their individual sections where they would like to greet. Sometimes people like to greet at a door that's closest to where they sit on Sunday. We're creatures of habit. A lot of us just sit in the same place on Sunday. So it's nice to be able to select a place that's near the serving near where you're already sitting. So I'm going to go ahead and create some subgroups for this. So we're going to do East Lobby. Okay. Then we'll add another one for West Lobby. And finally, one more for balcony. Okay. All right, so now I have the ability to indicate how many I need in each of these sections. And then we have this column that says require. All right, so this is kind of a silly example. This probably doesn't fit with the scenario that I've set up, but the require feature, if I were to activate that now what that's doing is that will require the individual to actually be in that subgroup before they can request that time slot, before they can volunteer for that time slot. So let's say that the balcony, that's where the very important people enter the building, and you must be specially trained to take that position. So in that scenario, I would select balcony so I can have a little bit more control over who's selecting those time slots. Okay. Now I can select add time slot, and the process repeats itself. For the sake of time, we'll just go ahead and save what we have here. But I could select add time slot from here, and I could do this again for, say, our 11 o'clock service, and so on. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save on this. And now I'm going to jump over to our communication tab. And this is where the system is handling the communication. Again, the confirmation emails, the reminder emails. One really cool feature of the scheduler is that we have reminder email 1 and reminder email 2. So you can, if you want to, have 2 different reminder emails, one that's going to go out, say, 10 days prior to the commitment, and then another reminder email that's going to go out, say, 2 days prior to the commitment. Okay. So we'll go ahead and save that as well. And now we should have fulfilled all of our requirements for building the scheduler. So I'm going to hit finish, refresh the page. And that's going to pull up the scheduler. So there we are. So now I'm going to jump over to one that I have a little bit more fleshed out. I have a few more people already registered onto this one. And now from here, I want to show you two sides of the coin. So first is the volunteer themselves. What is the experience that the volunteer themselves will have? So I'm going to go to the gear icon, try registration. If you've built registrations on TouchPoint before, you're familiar with this concept. And then we'll go to the form. Now, I'm already signed in here, but I do want to let you know that the sign-in process for this one is the sign-in process for Scheduler is using the new easy sign-in method. So if you're using TouchPoint Giving, then you're familiar with this. Someone puts in their phone number, hit submit, we send them a verification code, and boom, that gets them signed in. So it's a lot easier to get signed in for those users. Okay, so now here are all the time slots that this person can select. So here for Sunday, June 18th, I could select between 9:15 and 11 o'clock. If I try to select a time slot that's at the same time or volunteer commitment that's at the same time, system say, hey, you know what, you can't be in two places at once. So we're going to try and mitigate any duplicate commitments. You'll notice up here at the top that I have a couple of options. I can cancel some of these that are out in the future, but those that are coming up, like this commitment is the 28th. We don't want people canceling because we're almost there. It is almost the 28th. So we want them to request a sub. So I'm going to go ahead and hit sub request here so I can demonstrate this for you. If I were to request a sub, the system is going to bring me to a pre-formatted email that you all would have composed. You put this together. Now we have a default in there already for you, so you can go ahead and be up and running today if you want it to be, but you can also modify this. But you see that the system generates a subject line and the email itself. Within the email are two special links. So you don't really want to mess with these links if you do modify this. But the first link says, yes, I can sub for you. Sorry says, sorry, I cannot sub for you. The first person, the first sub that says, yes, I can sub for you, gets the time slot. Every subsequent person gets a nice screen that says, hey, this time slot is filled. Okay. Down here, I have my list of people that I can request to fill in for me. So up here in this first section, those are the people that are already serving. So you notice I can't select them. This next section, we don't have anyone in this section just yet, but the next section is showing you people who are volunteering at the same time, but on different weeks. And then finally, I can select a few people down here, or I can select everybody and hit send emails. Okay, so that's the end user's perspective. Now, switching gears just a little bit in about the last 2 to 3 minutes that I have here, I'm going to talk about your view internally if you wanted to just manage this yourself. And there's always going to be some manner of management for you. Maybe you empower a lay leader to have access to the screen so that they could come in here and manage this themselves as well. But I want you to see what we can do here. So for Sunday the 4th, I need 6 greeters. So I'm going to hit the plus sign here. And for this time slot, I'm going to go ahead and grab Bobby and Chris. Okay. Now I hit save on that. Now notice that when they go on there, they have a yellow check mark. Now the yellow check mark means that they have not committed yet. If I were to, or confirmed, excuse me, if I were to hit send confirmations, that's going to send them an email with a link in it where they can manage their commitment. They can click on confirm, and then that yellow check mark goes to a green check mark. Okay. Alternatively, if I pass, say, Ethan in the hall, and Ethan says, hey, I will be there on the 4th, you can count on me, I can go ahead and say already committed. And there we are. Now Ethan is going to be slotted in there with a green check mark because he's confirmed. Okay. But now ushers, remember with the ushers, we had the individual sections. So for ushers, I can go ahead and select Brian, select Jack. And then for East Side, I'm going to go ahead and grab Gary and Steve. And then for the West Side, we'll grab Clark. Okay, get them slotted in there. So now I can see how I'm doing, and I can see a breakdown here of how many I need for each section. Where are we still lacking? I can even come here and hit the 3 and request more. Request a sub for the person. Okay. you may have noticed it. I breezed past it pretty quickly, but everything that I've done here, I've done for this time slot. You also have the ability to slot people in for all week ones or all week ones perpetually. So I'm sure you have volunteers who have just said, hey, week one, you can count on me. I will always be there. So you can go ahead and grab all week ones perpetually, and we'll go ahead and slot Josh in for that. And now Josh is on my scheduler. I don't have to reschedule him. He will always be there for week one. Okay. All right. One other item that I want to add, and then we are going to jump over to our Q&A with Marcia. Then the last thing that I'm going to add is this year actually was a good example of when this would have come in handy. This year, Christmas and New Year's, or I suppose I should say last year, Christmas and New Year's fell on a Sunday. And so that threw a lot of schedules out of whack. People kind of had to readjust and modify. And that's where this add single meeting feature comes into play. So you can use this add single meeting. You can add these meetings, what we call ad hoc, one at a time, so that you have a little bit more control over when they show. And then you can delete meetings. So for those of you who maybe your normal worship service was at 9 o'clock on that Sunday, well, for Christmas, we moved to 9:30. That's how you would have accomplished that. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop there. I should have mentioned this at the top. I do see questions are coming in, and we will absolutely have time at the end to address some questions. So, all right, so I'm going to stop sharing here and invite Marcia into the conversation.
Hello.
So, my questions pulled up for you, Marcia, and there they are. I'm so sorry.
Oh, sure.
They got hidden from me. Okay. All right. So, Marcia, just to kind of kick things off and get this started, how do you how do you use Scheduler at your church and for your teams?
I manage the volunteers at Peachtree Presbyterian Church that really are our greeters and ushers. And so I use Scheduler for Sunday morning volunteers, for Christmas and Easter, and then any congregational wide event that we may have.
Okay. And so you all you implemented Scheduler pretty quickly. You all were one of our beta testers, and you got up running pretty quickly. Can you tell us about how you trained and communicated the changes to the volunteers themselves?
Yes, we kind of knew if we were going to be implementing a new system and we wanted buy-in from our volunteers, we knew that we needed to be in constant communication with them, as well as to educate and train them to use the new software system. And so I have a weekly newsletter that I send out to all of our volunteers. And so I made sure to constantly be in contact with them about the software system, as well as I actually held a training at the church where we invited volunteers to come in. And then I actually showed them, very similar to kind of what you did in terms of how to sign up to serve, and showed them how to use it, so that way they felt comfortable using it. And as well as I was able to tell the volunteers, hey, we're in this together. Like, this is a new system. I'm learning it. You're learning it. And we're going to basically learn how to use this to the best of our ability together as a team.
And that's one thing that I thought you did really well when we were talking about this and when we were getting up and running. The engagement that you had with your volunteers, bringing them in, having a meeting face to face, and actually talking through these, I thought was really a stroke of genius for you all.
Well, and
it worked well. Well,
yes, it really was helpful because it also allowed for me to basically say to them, like, this is how I envision using the system. And this is also why it's not only going to be beneficial for me to manage you, but it's going to be beneficial for you because it can actually keep track of your commitments. And so I think that was kind of a light bulb that went off in their heads of like, hey, this is going to help me. So I'm not having to try to figure out, did I sign up? Did I not sign up? They can log into TouchPoint and see their commitments.
And were you all using a scheduling tool prior to installing this?
We were actually using kind of two different basically features. We were using one that was like a data programmer independently that was creating a form on our website, and then would also then run reports. And we also use Sign Up Genius. And so, one of the problems we had there is having stuff in two different locations. You're using two different softwares. And so made it a little difficult for me in terms of my job, because I had to be sure and make sure, like if someone changed an email address, I had to be like, okay, I have to remember to change that in two places, versus just having, which is great about Scheduler, is that I can now just go in and it's all done. It's one place.
Yeah. And to that end, we talk about data. I'm going a little off script here, Marcia, so I apologize. But we were talking about how you kind of manage some of that data. And you all did such a great job of communicating to your volunteers, hey, the data that we have on you matters. So let's confirm that. Can you speak about how you did that a little bit?
Yes, and that is absolutely because of your recommendation, Andrew, and I loved it. And basically, what I did is I printed up all of the information we had for each volunteer, so that when they came to the training, I said, hey, this is the information we have for you. Please look it over, be sure it's correct, because that information is what we have to use to basically for our system to keep track of your commitments. And so I think that, again, that helped them understand, like, you can't use two email addresses, you can't use two cell phone numbers, because if you want the system to save your commitments, it has to be able to find you. And that was really helpful because it helped keep our data clean. Very quickly from that meeting, I had some people say, oh, this isn't correct, or this isn't right. And I think it also helped them understand why they need to be sure and use just one email address, one cell phone number, so that therefore the system can find their commitments.
Okay, so now getting into the nuts and bolts a little bit about how you all actually set that up. Did you all end up using rolling number of weeks or calendar start in days? And why did you make that?
We actually use both. I used the rolling number of weeks for our Sunday morning ushers and greeters. And that is fabulous because, again, once you create that initial form, it just then rolls over for every Sunday. And then I also use the calendar start and end date for, say, Easter worship services or Christmas worship services that are, we would have a traveler service or a congregational wide event. And those would be just a one-time meeting that I would create and then use in Scheduler.
And so looking at your scheduler, when we were reviewing it, you have 6 teams for each hour. So how did you decide to divide those up? And you have the various locations throughout the sanctuary. Why divide them up rather than just kind of keep them all together?
Well, at Peachtree, we have a definite delineation between our roles, between a greeter and an usher. An usher collects offering, which, has some importance and, a little more weight to it than versus a greeter who stands, outside the sanctuary or in hallways and greets people and welcomes them. And so I immediately wanted to have 2 different sign-up links, one for greeters and one for ushers on Sunday morning. And then the next thing that we made a decision about was, how are we going to arrange the sign up? And we decided to arrange it by location, so that instead of just having a volunteer say, hey, I'm signing up as an usher, and then showing up on a Sunday morning and then having a staff person assign them a location, we decided to have on the sign up locations. And we quickly found out that, volunteers really liked being able to choose a location that they wanted to serve in. And I think you mentioned it, earlier, people in the church, it kind of makes sense. They like sitting on the right side. So therefore they were more comfortable being, an usher on the right side of the church, because that's where they normally sit. They're comfortable in that space. And so we did find that using locations for our volunteers to sign up to serve really helped increase the number of volunteers that we had at Peachtree.
Yeah. I work with a lot of churches. I talk to a lot of churches. That might be the most universal thing that we all share in common, is that people like to People are creatures of habit. They will sit in the same seat every Sunday if they can. So one thing that I didn't mention in the presentation a moment ago was that once people have volunteered and for their commitment, we place them into a meeting, and then you can actually take attendance for them. Is that something? Is the attendance component? Is that something that you all have implemented? And why or why not?
And yeah, we have not implemented taking attendance. And the main reason for that is that we are very blessed to be going through a renovation at Peachtree. And so, we kind of made the decision that we would not add like another feature, that we would implement the software slowly and kind of let's just get them used to using Scheduler. Let's get them used to signing up. Let's get them comfortable with it. But I do think that going forward, I think when our renovation is complete, I think we will possibly take another look at using attendance and using that feature, because as we were mentioning about, that can be helpful with engagement and knowing, like, if a volunteer, didn't show up for 2 or 3 Sundays, okay, well, why is that? Then we should reach out to that volunteer and make sure, like, hey, what's going on? Like, do a check-in with them. And so I do think that's something that we will go back and take a look at and possibly have that implemented after our renovation.
Yeah. For those of you that don't know, Peachtree is going through a big renovation, and it's including the sanctuary itself, correct?
Yes, it is definitely the sanctuary itself. Yes. So it's, we're very busy and it's a very fun time. But there is, it's just a little busier around Peachtree than it normally is. We have a lot more workers on campus than before.
So are there any unique features or functions within the schedule that have been particularly beneficial that you've said, hey, this is one that's really working well for us?
Yes. One of the features that I really love is that you can go in and you could choose to email everyone who's signed up, like say on a Sunday morning as an usher. And that feature I love because, something can come up where, like, hey, I don't know, they've decided that, the children's choir has made the decision to come in and sing at the last service. And, I didn't include that information in our newsletter because I didn't have it at that time. So, hey, I can then email everyone who's serving on Sunday morning and say, hey, be aware this is, occurring. And then that will then help them in their role on Sunday morning.
And so what about new volunteers? That they raise their hand. How does someone first tell you that they're interested in volunteering? And then what's your process for bringing them up to speed with the scheduler features?
The way we have new volunteers, we recruit new volunteers. There's kind of 2 ways that we do that. One is our new member class. And when they're in a new member class, they're asked if there's any areas of the church they're interested in serving. And so, the group, the admin that's in charge of that class will send me a list of people who say, hey, I'm interested in hospitality. I'm interested in possibly serving. And I will take that list and then I will actually, via TouchPoint, send them an email and say, hey, these are our roles. This is what it is to be a greeter. This is what it is to be an usher. Let me know if you're interested in one of those. And also, hey, here's the link. So if you want to go ahead and sign up to serve, you're welcome to. And then we will then have them meet in person one-on-one and make sure that they receive a training on, what it actually is to serve on the Sunday morning.
Might be one of my favorite things about y'all's kind of internal processes is that you kind of use a 2-pronged approach. We have the software, people can go there online, they can make their own commitments, but then also having those personal interactions with them and explaining these are the expectations, here's how you can use the system. I think that's what's, from my perspective, I think that's what's been so beneficial and made y'all so successful in this. All right, last question on my list. How do you handle when someone declines a volunteer request? Is there anything that you do special when you see that cancellation come across?
I mean, we try to find out why, why is there a reason why someone, can't serve on a Sunday? If it's just like they're going out of town or, okay, well, that's great. But what if there's another personal issue and in a way that we can care for our volunteers? I mean, they are a community and we want to care for them, make sure, hey, if they're, sick or they're ill, can we pray for you? Is there anything we can do for you? And also too, we're a point of contact where we can also reach out to their belong communities, which is like their Sunday morning communities, and say, hey, this person, reached out to me, they declined, so they can't volunteer. But hey, that's because I found out it's because I reached out to them and they're not feeling well. Hey, I just want to let you guys know as well, so that y'all could then also possibly care for, this individual as well.
That's fantastic. So that's the end of the questions that I had planned. Is there anything that you'd like to add? Anything that we didn't touch on?
I mean, I would just say in general, Scheduler has made my job a great deal easier, because all of our data and all of our information is in one place. I will say, we took some effort to get our data implemented, but the beauty of that is that it's now very clean. I don't have 2 or 3 different rosters to keep track of. I know our information and TouchPoint is, correct, because I've made sure of it. And then it also makes it so easy for me to just like you showed, I can sign people up. So if someone says to me, hey, Marcia, do you need help on Sunday? And I'm like, yes, I do. I need somebody this Sunday to greet. Okay, well, great. I'll be there. I can go in very easily and sign them up. They can then receive a confirmation email and they know, hey, Marcia signed me up. I'm going to make sure I'm there. And so just in general, it's made my job a great deal easier. And I think it also has made it easier for us to, manage and care for our volunteers.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. We have some questions rolling in here. One person that is on our call that we didn't point out at the top, Stacy. A lot of you know her and recognize the name. She is working through and I'm gonna see if there's something that we can address here in the time that we have remaining. Let's see here. Update the look of the actual. So one person asking, can we update the look of the actual scheduler sign up? So let me share my screen for just a moment. And there are some things that you can do here. Again, some of these concepts will be familiar to you because it is a registration. If I go over to the registration, the settings tab, excuse me. The settings tab, the shell. So you do have the ability to swap out shells, to modify the shells, and they can be branded and look however you'd like them to look. And it's going to be very, very similar to what you're doing with your current registrations. In addition, on the registration tab, you may have noticed the instructions section, and I have put into the options section just some general instructions. And this is using just the normal WYSIWYG editor, where you can update that information. You see that I've made some things bold. I've bumped the font up quite a bit, and I've given some special instructions. Our ushers, we need them to be 15 minutes early, and we need them to wear a tux. And I don't think I'm asking too much. And then greeters, we're just asking our greeters to be friendly. So you do have quite a bit of flexibility there. And then you probably noticed during the presentation that those instructions live just below the title of the scheduler. Now let's see here. What else we have in here? Stacy, are there any that you'd like me to address directly?
Sorry, I'm just hurriedly typing here.
That's all right. They are. We do have a ton of questions rolling in.
Maybe I don't know if you have an answer to this, but a couple people have asked about a way to see who's signed up before, like previous volunteers. The way I know is to look at the meetings tab to see who's there. But do you know of another way or more efficient way?
So I believe we have a search condition that tracks registrations. So you could utilize that to see who has registered for particular involvements in the recent past. That is also a great use case for why attendance could be useful. And that's why we did work to make sure that attendance was a part of this. And that includes down here we are, check-in. So that includes check-in. We wanted to make sure that this is an involvement that could be included in the check-in process so that it's easy. If parents are already dropping off the kiddos, then they can go ahead and check into their involvement as well. And that gives us a lot of great data to see who has volunteered in the past. All right, we have time for maybe one more here. And then for those of you that we don't get to, I apologize, and we will get answers out to you separately.
If someone declines a sub request, is there a way to remove the request to sub option?
Not
like they're wanting like the hospitality manager to be able to find the sub and not the volunteers themselves.
Yeah, and what I would say that, and in fact, I believe this is how Marcia has hers set up. If you set your lockout days that I was discussing before, if you set your lockout days to 0, then people will never have the opportunity to request a sub. In other words, they will always be able to cancel, but you are notified. When I say you, I'm talking about the person here on the email from section. So this person will be notified whenever someone cancels. We can't turn off that cancel feature, but everyone will be notified. Or sorry, your team will be notified, and they will have the ability to cancel rather than to request a sub.
And that is, Andrew, the way that I use the system, is that we at this time don't allow sub requests. And that's mainly just because we wanted to implement it slowly and get people comfortable at first. And again, that's something that we may look at later, adding.
One person asked, and this is a good question. Robert asks, what happens if someone requests a sub but does not get any replies before the event date? The way that I like to communicate this is that basically the volunteer is kind of on the hook until they are notified. They do get notified when someone has accepted their sub request. So they are kind of on the hook for that. Now, I will mention that, and I'm not showing it here, unfortunately, but whenever someone does request a sub, there is a little indicator here next to their name that says SF, which stands for sub or SR, excuse me, sub requested. It says SR sub requested. So you know that they have requested a sub. And then if we're getting close to that date and you see that no sub has been slotted in for that person, then you can take the appropriate action yourself. All right, and I think that is, so we are right at 2:40 now. So I think we are at time. Thank you all so much for joining us. Marcia, can't thank you enough. I think that was phenomenal. Really appreciate it. And for those of you that would like to know more about Scheduler, it is in the documentation. You can go to the docs.touchpointsoftware.com, search for Scheduler, and find the resources there. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.